Well, don't waste time, and if people skip my introduction, maybe that's acceptable. Yeah, welcome everybody to our second EIWO policy webinar. And as you have seen, the webinar will be recorded, and we will publish the meeting online on the website. I hope that will be okay. You got a kind of warning when you came in here and agreed about the recording. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So I hope that's yeah. Again, I hope that's fine, and it's good to have this online. It will be also on YouTube then, on our YouTube channel. As you know, most of you do, I was a research policy program on exclusion and inequality in late working life, funded by Forte, and it's in Sweden, the Swedish Research Council for Health, Working Life and Welfare, and EIWO has the ambition to contribute to the European discussion on the issue of late working life and to promote the equal and inclusive prolongation of late working life. We built on current and previous research, of course, and we started a webinar series already in October with the first webinar, which was on policies towards extended working life in aging Europe, with great presentations and quite a long discussion also. And today's webinar is the second in the series. It's on inequality and new exclusion risks by prolonged work. And just to advertise the next one, in December, the EIWO webinar number 3 will be on pluralization, inhomogenization, adult learning and education, and will take place on December 9th. And the series will also most likely be continued in 2022. We will send invitations to all who registered, so don't worry, you will get to know about it if you registered before, and you did, otherwise you won't be here. And yeah, today we will have a research presentation again, and 3 more policy-oriented contributions. We will start with a presentation by Gülin, Öylü, who is an early stage researcher at the division Aging and Social Change here at Linköping University. And she will give a research-based overview on extending working lives in 4 countries and the inequalities and policy issues around it. And after that, we are then happy to hear impulses on policy perspectives on extended working life inequality from Marina, Monaco, who is a policy advisor at the European Trade Union Confederation in Belgium, where I learned that today we have a bank holiday, and so we are delighted that it nevertheless worked to participate. We have a presentation by Vitalija Gaucaite Wittich. She is a chief of the population unit at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. And I saw you, Vitalija, somewhere. I don't see you now. Just in the middle. Okay, so hello. And finally, then there will be a third presentation by Erik Solem, who is a professor at the Oslo Metropolitan University and the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Which I must confess to not know whether that's in Oslo or close to it. Erik will let us know. And yeah, it's a very special welcome to you all, and thanks a lot for accepting our invitation. After this presentation, we will again open the floor for discussions among the panelists, but also with the audience. Time will never be sufficient, so please let us know afterwards if there were further questions, contributions or issues that you find should have a place but didn't have a place in here. You will find all contact details in the webinar invitation, and of course you can always contact all participants separately, directly, if you prefer this. Just a remark, I will chair this webinar until 2 o'clock. I have to leave because there's a lecture waiting to be given, and my colleague Susanne Schelve, maybe perhaps also Annika Heuer and Gülin Öylü will continue with us. So don't worry if I switch off my camera. The meeting is not over, and please stay and simply continue. I'm sorry for this, but it's some confusion with summer and winter time and time lags between countries, and maybe it's simply a calendar confusion. So sorry for this. And Gülin, do you want to take over and simply start with the presentation? Then it's up to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm sharing my screen. I hope you can see it, all right? Yeah. Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about inequality and exclusion risks in late working life, specifically the example of Sweden. And I'm going to present using the results from my dissertation as well as the EIWO project results. Before presenting the results, I would like to give some brief information about the policies regarding extension of working life in Sweden in the last 30 years. As many other countries in Sweden, there were attempts to increase participation of older workers and extending the working life. So some of the examples includes more strict disability insurance rules. Also, in Sweden, there is no mandatory retirement age, but there are age criteria for having the public pension age. Also, there is an age limit for employment protection coverage. So in 1998 and in 2001, these ages are extended. And in 2020, now the age of eligibility raised from 61 to 62. But within my study, it's not. This is not included. And also, in 2008, once more the health requirements for disability insurance is become more strict. First of all, also before starting presenting the results, all the results generated and presented here are generated using Swedish administrative data sources and cover all almost all Swedish population given age groups and cohort. So first of all, I'm going to present the participation rates of the 5 cohorts and whether to see there was a change regarding their inclusion in working life. So it covers 5 different cohorts. And the gray one is the youngest cohort. As you see, from the oldest cohort in 1930, there were shift of participation, and this shift was more for the older age groups. The shift is not as much significant for the age of 60 and 61. And we see there is a larger shift between 2 cohorts, which is from 35 to 40. And this is the time that we had several policy changes that affect the 1940 cohort that I mentioned in the previous slide, which are more strict disability insurance and the pension age, earliest pension age increased. And also employment protection coverage is increased. And we obviously see a participation increase, but we also would like to look at whether this participation shift the same or as the same magnitude for each groups regarding education and gender. And here we can see higher educated men and primary educated men and women. And all of the education and gender groups have a shift in their participation. But the shift isn't the same and differ among, especially for the primary educated women, we have smaller shift. And for the early 60s, we don't see that much disparity because the shift was smaller for all groups. But when it comes to after 65, the shift was the largest for higher educated women, and that leads to there is now for the youngest cohorts, there is almost very small disparity regarding their participation in working life. And the biggest disparity from primary educated women couldn't keep up with the participation. Of course, it's important to mention that we define participation as any inclusion and any connection with companies. So there's if we look at participation regarding part-time work or temporary employment, this disparity even could be deeper. So given that all the groups have different shifts, and we wanted to also look at the latest cohort and analyze their participation and benefit receipts across different education and gender groups. And here we see for the youngest group that we mentioned, 1950 cohort, we see for each age group the share of population that exits working life. And the highest share is in the 65 for all groups, even though in the retirement age is flexible in Sweden, since the 65 is the limit for unemployment pension and sickness compensation, and the age that is possible to have pension support, guarantee pension. 65 is the popular and the highest share that individuals exit working life. And the higher share is again in primary educated and when men and women. So in each group, we looked at the share of individuals, unemployment benefit and sickness compensation receipt, because looking these benefits, we can have some information, the reasons of these exits from the working life. So this is the share of individuals using unemployment benefit receipts in the exit year. So almost 30% of primary educated men use unemployment benefit receipt, which means they are unemployed right before they exit. And again, for the sickness compensation, which is in Sweden, sickness compensation corresponds to reduced working ability, so people who are not able to work as much as before. So this is higher for this time. This is higher for women, especially primary educated women, but even for higher educated women is higher compared to men. So here we can see two pictures. We see that share of exit at 65 is larger for all groups, but before these age groups, the mechanisms of these exits differ, because men are more likely, especially primary educated men, are more likely to be unemployed right before the exit, and women, higher share of women use sickness compensation. And talking about the unemployment benefit, we also looked at unemployment risk and reemployment chances, because obviously people use unemployment benefits right before exit. So we would like to look at whether people are more likely to be unemployed related with their education level and age. Also, what are the chances of their reemployment in the working life? And we looked at the unemployment event in 2017, and these are the groups that are working in the end of 2016. And then this is the share of people who were working in the beginning of the year. Then they both lose their job, but also apply for the unemployment benefit, meaning that they were actively searching for a job. So this is, so we see that again, it's a higher, this risk. By the way, these risks are calculated by controlling their attachment to the company sector, education, and gender. So again, we see the risk is higher for primary educated women and men, and the unemployment risk increasing for older age groups except 64. And this is understandable, because we define unemployment as registering unemployment agency as well, and after 65 it's not possible to have unemployment benefits. And yeah, so then we look at whether these people we see here are able to re-employed in 2018. So here we see the after controlling sector, education, gender, and attachment, we see the different groups likelihood of re-employment within a year. So as you see, even in the early 50s, almost half of the primary educated men and women are unable to find a re-employment in a new company. And this is a bit more higher for higher educated men and women, but still it's only 60%. And then this likelihood of re-employment decreases sharply when we go to the 60s. And of course, there is also pension incentive after the 61-year-old, but even in we see this sharp decrease in late 50s and age of 60. And overall, for all age groups, we see the same trend between men and women. So it's being women always increase the chances 3 percentage points, and having primary education decrease the chances 10 percentage points for in terms of the re-employment. So to sum up, first I would like to summarize my results before talking about the policy implications. The policy change and the common trend for increase in participation in the last years lead to increase in participation overall for the younger cohorts, but this participation wasn't the same levels for different education and gender groups. Especially primary educated women are couldn't keep up with the higher educated women or primary educated men, and this leads to increase in inequality in terms of participation across education and gender groups. And for primary educated women, maybe you remember from the figures, they already start to leave the labor market before 61 pension eligibility age. And 65, even though there is no mandatory retirement age, 65 is still the most common retirement age for all groups. And but when we look at the benefit receipt, it differs. The shares differs across the education and gender groups. Unemployment receipt is higher for men, and receipt of sickness compensation, which is for reduction in working abilities, are more common for primary educated individuals. And also, unemployment risk is higher for lower educated and older workers, and re-employment chances are significantly low for almost all groups, but lower for lower educated and older age workers. So when we look at the results and think about the policy implications of them, even though because we actually see the disability insurance, more restrictive disability insurance mechanisms, also increasing pension eligibility criteria actually lead to increase in participation. So because these are the common policies used in many countries, but still even though these policies increase the participation, the exclusion and inequality risks in the late working life remains, especially for the more lower skilled workers. And when in this presentation, we focused on unemployment event as well as the reduction in ability of working that contributes to this inequality and exclusion mechanisms. So if we want to have more inclusive and more extended working life for all groups, policies should include looking for these mechanisms for reduction of the disability from work, as well as the improving employability of older workers to prevent the exclusion and inequality. But these policies, of course, the pension eligibility policies wouldn't be enough for this. Policies that look at for early life course and earlier working life of individuals should be implemented, and anti-discrimination policies, lifelong learning opportunities, and also improving working environment and working schemes are the examples of that could prevent these mechanisms for inequality and exclusion in late working life. And that's all from me. Thank you for your attention, and I'm stopping now.
Yeah, thank you, Gülin. Is there any direct questions to this? Because we wanted to have an overall Q&A or discussion part at the end, but if you have direct comments or questions. Doesn't look like this, so I hand over to Marina Monaco, and from the trade union perspective, I think there's remarks to the issue and the contributions from your side.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to raise some open questions that for policymakers will have to be answered very, very urgently. We all know that the demographic trend imposes somehow to revise the approach of the world of work to the longer life expectancy. This is important not only because of the assumed lack of fiscal sustainability, of longer pension periods, and so pension systems, basically. This is something we have to take care of, because actually companies will have to start dealing with workers who are more and more aged. And under that point of view, it is a sort of an epochal change, which will inform not only the normative side of labor, but also the practical side of work organization. And when it comes to inequalities, we see that in approaching the demographic change, they increase the life expectancy, the tendency in some countries to retain workers at work longer and longer, to postpone legal retirement age in connection with the supposed, and I underline, supposed and generalized life expectancy is something which raises inequalities rather than addressing them efficiently. From the social point of view, we are able to say so because if we take the European Pillar of Social Rights that openly and very clearly says that everyone, meaning everyone, all people, independently from their socioeconomic status, their education, their skills, has the right to a decent pension and to a decent level of life and old age protection. We can register that this is not the case. And I'm sure that research can confirm the data. Nevertheless, the pandemic was so clear in showing the mistreatment that elderly people, even on the workplace, can have. That somehow we can assume that this mistreatment is correct, is a good perception. We know that life expectancy, as Gülin has somehow sketched is a result of very, very early stages situations. So the socioeconomic condition impacts the length of the life, especially in good health of people and workers. And this already means that if a longer life expectancy can be considered for some a good achievement of the European social and economic model, this is not the case for everyone. There are huge cohorts of population that since the very beginning of their life do not have access to healthy food, healthy homes, healthy educational environment, healthy lifestyle, whatever can pave the way to a long and healthy life. Secondly, when we consider that workers are faced with work in their life, in the later stages of their life, we also have to consider that not all works are the same. Not all works are the same because there is a huge amount of arduous jobs that have to be recognized by the norms and by the legislative protection, for example, allowing early retirements and access to pension at a certain age, before it is too late somehow. And on the contrary, there are, and I'm not only referring to the traditional physically engaging jobs that are already somehow categorized and yet don't have the protection they deserve. There is a huge number of jobs that are physically arduous and are not recognized. In many countries, for example, the job of nurses and paramedical assistants is not considered as an arduous job. And another aspect of inequality is the fact that there is no consensus and no generalized attention to the difficulty of keeping up with psychological stress. And this is another aspect that must be considered depending on the work performed, but also on the age. The European Commission has recently issued the Green Paper on aging, and the ETUC has proposed its views. The fact that there are a series of countries in which the European Economic Governance Framework somehow imposed pension reforms that postpone the legal retirement age is something that raises further grounds of inequality. Please think of all those workers who contribute to the pension systems for many, many years, and for one reason or another, they don't reach the legal retirement age simply because they die before the retirement age, because there is a problem, for example, linked to another ground for huge inequality, which is the effectiveness, the very jeopardized effectiveness of health and safety practices across Europe. The workers who have who have contributed to the system all their lives, won't simply enjoy the benefits they have accrued. And on the other hand, they will see their legal retirement age, so the moment where they can start enjoying rest, which is physiological, going further and further. And this is a little bit what happens to those workers that cannot remain on the labor market because they are expensive, or because they can be replaced and they can be left redundant for years before having access to pension legally, simply because of conditions of the labor market that are not prepared to keep them at work in a productive and yet healthy way. So these are different aspects that must be considered at policy level in raising nasty, unequal situations that cannot be stand any longer. And I think that trade unions are becoming more and more vocal on this aspect after the pandemic, because workers, elderly workers, are asking for more justice. The last remark I would like to make is with regards to the solutions that European social partners are trying to find in order to smooth and reduce such unequal gaps among workers, linked to the fact that the demography is changing and we are living longer in general. And therefore they negotiated a framework agreement at European level, which concerns active aging and intergenerational solidarity. Via this agreement, they aim at proposing solutions and a deep, in-depth reflection of companies, trade union representatives, as well as policymakers, on the fact that we must consider work and life at work as aging in a life cycle approach. We have to consider that we start aging the day we're born, as the commissioners would say, and therefore we have to adapt the workplace, the work organization, even the technologies and digital tools that will be made available in order to support humans in aging with dignity, in good health, and to remain at work as long as their good health, productivity, and motivation allows them to. Which means that somehow we also have to foresee some solidarity systems, for example, taking into consideration that the digital transition may imply a huge change in productivity, and the productivity gains will have to be not only considered under the economic side, so they should be somehow redistributed, especially to support those who cannot work as long as expected by the systems, but they also have to be redistributed in terms of well-being and health of the people and workers. So they have to be somehow oriented in making work more sustainable across the lifetime at work. I hope I've provided enough food for reflection.
Yes, thank you very much for this contribution. And I think we should discuss this then directly at the end after the next two presentations. And I take the opportunity now to hand over to Susanne Schelve, who will take over the chair, as announced, have to leave. And Susanne, are you ready for this?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much, and it's up to you.
Okay, thank you, Andreas, and good luck with the lecture. Well, we have 40 minutes left, and we have two more presentations. And we start with Vitalija Gaucaite Wittich. I'm not sure if I pronounce your name correctly, but please correct me. Let's see, Vitalija, I think you're muted still. Let's see if I could I help you to unmute?
No, I will unmute.
Now you're on mute.
I'm
Thank you.
so unmute, but somehow I cannot share, it seems. Gülin, can you share my presentation, please? Because I tried to share, it does not work.
Yes, sure. Yes.
Yeah. So if you can put the full screen, okay. Thank you very much, Gülin. And I will ask you next, okay? Good afternoon to everybody. I'm really happy to be invited to speak at this webinar. But I will not concentrate only on the Europe. Since I'm representing United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, we have 56 member states, extending from Vancouver in Canada to Vladivostok in Russia. So we have a broader constituency than 27 European Union countries plus United Kingdom that not long ago was still a part. It's half of our constituency. And we did some work especially for that. Please, next one. Next slide, yeah. And also I want to say that when we talk about policy frameworks, from my point of view, I'm looking more in the international, on the international policy frameworks, not at the national level as much. Gülin's presentation was very informative and very interesting, and all these inequalities came through very clearly. We do also some studies on the inequalities, but I wanted to kind of focus a bit more how to overcome them if possible, and what we do. We have Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, which is our framework that guides our work, which was adopted by the Second World Summit on Aging in 2002, and it has these 5-year cycles that we ask countries to look into what was achieved and how the things are moving on in implementing this Madrid Plan of Action, which is quite comprehensive and covers health and population development and other matters. So I put there the data a bit on our region. So at the moment, we have around 219 million people 65 years and older, and that is about 30%, a bit more than 30% of the world's population of 65 years and older. Well, altogether, UNEC region accounts for 16.5% of world's population. So we're really the region that is quite aged and also aging rather rapidly in some parts of it. I also put some data on the life expectancy, how it evolved since 2002. Practically 2005, it's the middle year that picked up of the cycle the data refers to. And you can clearly see that the life expectancy was growing. It's not to say so, but statistically it shows the data is there. It does not mean that the health life expectancy was growing as rapidly or as fast, but still it was healthy life also increased quite reasonably. I also mentioned here the main kind of socioeconomic events during these periods that we keep in also the context to understand how the policies evolved. If the first cycle was very positive, it was the growth and a lot of the Also, employment was growing, and countries were looking how to allow people to retire earlier, to get out, because it was enough of movement going. Then came the crisis, financial crisis. Then we have the very uneven recovery from it, and there was a change how the also sustainability of the welfare systems was questioned. Next, please. So I put 2 points here. We have our member states that they gather every 5 years and adopt so-called Ministerial Declarations, where they will be focusing another 5 years. And these were 2 recent ones. And as you see, the first one was looking at the promoting quality of life and active aging. And in Lisbon in 2017, the focus more was on realizing the potential of living longer, recognizing the potential of older persons, and it was in a way a bit more broader than the first one. But the Vienna Declaration that on promoting the active aging took over a lot in the countries, and many countries, when they were developing the policies on aging, they took this active and healthy aging element very strongly and followed on it. So encouraging longer working life and supporting ability to work was the very important part of both these ministerial declarations. That was happening in the changing policy and political landscape. We started limiting early retirement schemes, increased the age of entitlements, as we heard, to pension benefits, but also promoted safety and adapted working places. This was also a move that was very strong behind in supporting this active aging and supporting the healthy aging, and introducing measures to support life-work balance. This is also a very important element, actually, in many countries, but it's not only for the younger generation that takes care for rearing the children, but also looking into the possibility to take leaves of absence and that not affect very much the pension income for the later, for the care work, etc. So these measures were introduced as a policy measures in many countries, and we are looking now what kind of effects might be. Next slide, please. To grasp to get some understanding about it, we also at the same time in 2012 worked together with the European Commission, DG Employment for that time, but also teamed up with the researchers, with the expert group, created an expert group of leading researchers from sociology, demography, but also political sciences, as well as NGO and government representatives, to develop some measuring tool to address this developments, this active aging, and the created active aging index. The lead among the researchers took at that time the European Center for Welfare Policy and Research in Vienna, and at that time the director for research was Asghar Zaidi, who afterwards moved to Southampton. So this is trying to measure the active aging, but the core, of course, it's on the contribution of all the people to the paid economy through employment, to the participation in society, where you have the volunteering political participation, but also support for family, for grandchildren, and for those who are infirm or lose their capacities. But also an important part of the contribution is through independent, healthy and autonomous life, but and looking into also the capacity. So these are 4 domains that include 22 indicators, and I think several of you are quite familiar with it. But what we also were in a way criticized in some circles, that we took quite a strong point on this active economic participation, so employment element. But today we talk about it, so I will focus on it. Next slide, please. We also looked at that for the differences and inequalities. We looked at the gender, and that's the kind of the very first what comes into it. And the active aging index allows us to calculate separately for women and men. And you see the gender gap It is for the 2020 active aging index that we released this last December, which is based on the data for 2018, mainly 2019. So the biggest gap, as you see, was in the paid economy, with the little icon of the portfolio of the working life. It is, as you see, the quite a big gender gap there. And that also impacted the gender gap for overall index. Next slide, please. Now, how the employment, our general employment domain was calculated, these were 5-year groups of the employed, and we looked at, and they were treated equally, 25% to each. So this was equal treatment. It's not that, so you will not get the data for the total active aging index employment domain is not the same as if you would look 55 plus all the population. Because these are groups that were treated equally and aggregated into one. But you can very clearly see how different behaviors were in different countries, even if they are, let's say here, if you look at the Estonia, which is in principle leading, is the second in the employment domain, but it's not second because of it's better in the earlier life in 55, 59 or 60, 64, but actually because it is showing much better results in 65, starting from 65 plus. So Estonia, United Kingdom, Latvia and Lithuania, these countries are really where the older population are still staying in workplace, relatively speaking to the other countries, and and against the mean of the European Union. This is 28 countries, as I said, because there is the data is 2018. So we keep. Next slide, please. Since often also we are reproached in a way that this index does not look at all in the well-being of people. Yes, it is not, and it is not for that. It is for looking at the contribution. But we try to dispel that, at least showing by the correlation, which is shown for the satisfaction, life satisfaction. Of course, it's not causality. We don't claim that it is because active aging is much better in these countries, so the satisfaction is better. But we show that there is a correlation. So we cannot say that it is there is none, and there is some necessarily negative impact. Next slide, please. Also, what I wanted to draw your attention, and this slide is from the publication that we issued in 2019. That's why the data is through 2016. It's not the most up to date, but I wanted to show you here on the change of this, how much the employment increased in the countries for the later age groups. And you can see that in some countries it increased very much, but also you can see the gender differences. And in many countries it was that it was, of course, women that their employment increased very much over those years from 2008 to 2016. However, we know that in many countries, especially those that joined European Union in 2004, the retirement age for women was 55, or just, well, for men was 60. And this retirement age that was increased gradually now, and the gap between men and women for the retirement age is slowly closing, especially for the Baltic countries, but also in Hungary and in other countries. So this has to be kept in mind when one looks into the context there. But as you see, in some countries actually was decline, was the decrease, not the increase, and it was a decrease mainly for male in this employment activity. So if we take next slide, I focused on the European Union, and here I wanted to show you some non-European, but in comparison with two European Union countries, by the in diversity within age groups of the labor force participation. And as you see, it's an interesting aspect of Georgia, I would say, which is beating every other country in this slide, but also in many other, if more countries in our region we will put. But also you have in Turkey for male participation, which decreases very little by age 65 plus. And it is much not as steep decline like in Estonia or in Poland when you take for women, especially at the age of 55, 59, as you see that it goes down very quickly. What happened in Georgia? It was that some 20 years ago, there was a very strong move out when one political party took over. They decided that all those who were in the Soviet system, they kind of deterred the development of the country, and they tried to push them out of the jobs in the public sector, except not taking, let's say, health and the education was left untouched, but in the administration they tried to push. And a lot of people were pushed out of their usual activities. And what happened that it was self-employment that started really taking up very strongly. There were a lot of small, medium enterprises coming up, or all the time something bubbling, and kept people there. And as you see that 65 plus, it's around 40% of male are still in the employment. It's not really the paid employment as employee. Many of them are self-employed in that sector. Some taxi drivers, some are in the agriculture, but it is a culture that became like that. So they are kept, they are staying in labor force. It is an interesting, I think it is an interesting aspect, and it leads also to the policy implications. When we talk that people in advance are informed and know about the changes in the pension and in the system, and so they kind of prepare themselves also to go. For the first group, it was really difficult, but later on, people knew that it's difficult to stay in the public sector. We need to get out and try to invent something new. So this is a path. This not happened in Belarus, where the practically private sector was not developed during this. In Albania, it was a little bit. For males, it kept, but women were not active. And for Turkey, as you know, it's also quite flourishing. The semi-private sector is quite flourishing. Next slide, please. Now I would like to say a few words on all the workers as a key component of human capital reserves. As countries see, for policymakers, it is an important element. From the other side, it might not seem to be the right way of saying, but for us, it's a way of working with the policymaker. So ensuring opportunity to work is an important element. Exclusion, of course, may exist there, and you need to overcome that exclusion with some measures. So at the individual level, for ensuring opportunity to work, that would allow for people to have better financial security and resilience, in a way, getting their salary, being in employment, in addition to having the pension if this is a possibility. It also helps to stay networking and in social, and it is a lot of literature also shows that staying in the employment helps at the individual level to keep the network, to keep the social part. Mental well-being and self-esteem, it is actually two sides of coin. We look at some research that shows that self-esteem goes down for some people who couldn't retire as early as their earlier peers who worked in the same jobs. But that somehow it's, in one study I found that, but not in too many. For mental well-being, it again it's two sides. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it may not. It's individual approach. And cognitive well-being, it is practically medically proved that the more person is involved, the more varied work and the task he does, it's helping. At the organizational level and at the governance level, I don't want to stop too long here, but these are very important. And at the governance level, I think looking at the sustainability or the sustainable development and resilience, reducing poverty, it works when people get salary, fulfilling human right to work. It is also one of the very important elements for the policy making and politics. And more context between generations. That actually allows in many jobs, not in all, we would like to have much more. And also equity and non-discrimination. This is one has to work. Next slide, please. Not to say that everything is rosy. This is I call it a spider web. That actually those who are in this Euro-Ageism group know Maria helped me to create it. Maria Varlamova, the spider web, we worked on our policy brief on the ageism in the workforce. So in the working, in the work world. So there are a lot of barriers and a lot of issues where people can be discriminated, or where ageism persists, or where some, let's say, lack of skills that may also impact this exclusion in certain cases, lack of skills in the digital world, or in also the problem with the age management that considers that. Also different other aspects like insufficient normative frameworks where we, let's say in France, in Sweden, we hear it is not, there is no mandatory retirement age or even not statutory, but people retire around 65, the majority of them get it. But in other countries, it is mandatory. So you have to retire, there is no flexibility. So these things also exist. But of course, there are things that can be done. And we are looking at these things that can be done and that need to be done. And among them, let's say, ensuring the lifelong learning possibilities and then promotion within, and that would help re-employment or returning to work after a certain period of unemployment. But also on the health aging, on the promoting the preventive measures and etc. And next slide, please. Just briefly on the ageism, as you know, which pervasive there, that is one of the areas we were also looking on, and looking at all the explicit, implicit stereotypes, etc., but in all the areas of the employment where one has to address, and there are some solutions how to go about it. We address those solutions in our policy brief on, as I said, ageism in the workforce. So if you are interested, you can look at it. And the next slide, please. Here, I wanted to address also some aspects that Monica was mentioning in previous presentation, and I think that is what we are trying to encourage countries to do. It's to have this integrated cross-sectoral approach to policy making, to be really to mainstream aging in a way, but also to address the care needs that enhance health and well-being, ensure independence, economic inclusion, that these are things when we think about extending working life, that we have to think also about all other areas that are very important to make impact on. Also acknowledging different ways that all the adults contribute to society. That's what we started with our active aging index. It's not only that it's in paid economy, but also participation. Participation in the voluntary activity and civil society, participation in the political life, but also care toward children or other adults. It's a very important unpaid impact. And the heterogeneity of the destandardization of the life courses. This is very, again, because usually we talk about life cycle, cut it into linear way, children, education, work, retirement, etc. But life cycle is not life course. Life course is affected by many peaks and downs and ups, and these to capture the inequalities, to capture the exclusion, these are the most important parts. So life course impact is very important. Multi-focus on current generations of all the workers, but also on the future ones. The cohort analysis that you presented is also very important to keep in mind, and also for future. So solidarity element is very important, and ensuring that existing and developing policies work in favor of older workers, but also of younger ones. Because we know, if you look through the life course, those who were unemployed in young age tend to be more unemployed in the old age as well. So it is some what you carry on. You are not so successful in the beginning, you have low education, then you also carry all these disadvantages. They accumulate over your life. And when you reach the older age, you are with all this baggage on your back, and it is very difficult to overcome. So looking through the life course is a very important element. I would end up on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Next
Vitalija,
page.
for a very nice presentation, a nice contribution. And I think what you discuss here with the life course perspective is also very important, and that is actually something that we are working with now in EIWO. So, but we are very short on time, and we have still Erik Solem for a presentation or a comment, and hopefully we will have some time in the end for some discussion, and we can of course also stay a little bit longer if we like. So please, Erik. Let's see if we have Erik. I can see your name here on my screen.
Yes.
Yes.
I try to share the screen with the presentation, but I think
let's see. Is it some? Is it possible
if,
now?
I don't know.
This is strange, Gülin. It should be possible to share, right?
Yes, but I can also share if you
Yeah,
don't mind.
you can. Yeah, you have it. You can share.
Perfect. Thank you, Gülin.
1 second.
Yes, I'm going to present a little about ageism and how to promote inclusion of older workers from that perspective. My point of departure is a recent. You can take the next slide. Is a recent Norwegian study showing that managers' attitudes to older workers is strongly influencing their inclination to exclude older workers from job interviews. So then what is it about? Is it about attitudes, and is it ageism? Next slide, please. And this is a three-component model of attitudes with cognitive, affective components that are leading to behavior. I don't take time to say more about that, but take the next slide, which is on ageism, the same model on ageism, with stereotypes, prejudices, and gives a readiness to act and to discriminate against older workers or applicants. Then this model I used to kind of put up a system of how to counteract the different elements, components of the ageism model. You have the possibility of attacking stereotypes by information campaigns. You have the possibility of attacking prejudices, the affective part, by inviting to dialogues about affective bias. And in both these cases also, it's a question about contact, leading back to the old contact hypothesis of Allport from the 1950s, where contact are kind of increasing the possibilities of understanding and counteracting prejudice and discrimination. How this is working in working life, the effect, the impact of this in working life there's different results, and it's probably depending upon how the basic friendliness or unfriendliness to aging is in the workplace. That are, if you're increasing the number of older workers in the workplace that are basically unfriendly to older workers, it's maybe increased the difficulties. So it's not a very simple way of solving this. And then we have also, of course, the possibility of attacking ageism through direct legislation by company rules, saying that here in our company we don't talk about, we don't joke about old age, we don't use ageist language, and so on. And also there are some studies now showing that in a climate of altruistic values, with care and empathy, you can also be more aware of how you can have your stereotypes and your prejudices, but not let it come out into discrimination. So it's not necessary that stereotypes and prejudices are resulting in discrimination. Yeah, okay, to the next. The Norwegian Senior Policy Barometer, which I mentioned earlier, there says, please, one click, 50% of the managers in the private sector, the 50% of the managers in the private sector who fully agree that workers 60 years and older perform at least as well as work as those under 60, who are basically positive to the contribution of older workers. They still, if you take another click, they still hesitate to call in for interview applicants above 59.8 years in average. So the next, so why is that? That you believe in the work ability and the performance of all the workers, but you don't want them. What is the reason for that? Maybe performing the productivity is not enough. And then the next slide, please. Some other possible other reasons. 60 workers are expected to retire within a few years and have a short career. Next, at 60 workers are supposed to have high sickness absence. At 60 workers are not expected to cope well with information technology and social media, and they are maybe been given inadequate training in digital tools. And the age balance in the company may become skewed, and older workers are supposed to be more expensive than younger workers. Such reasons may have a basis in realities, but they may also be inflicted by stereotypes that might be corrected by facts. For instance, in the Norwegian Senior Policy Barometer, the sickness absence is decreasing with age, and the lowest age group with the lowest sickness absence is in the 60s. And also the salaries are on the top around 50. So there are some stereotypes that are maybe a problem for how employers would resist to employ older workers. Some possible other reasons at this should take the next slide. Aging is widely disliked, even feared, and older workers are reminders of aging. So this is a set of more effective kind of possible reasons. Next, please. And there is a cultural preference for young compared to old. And most of us above 30, we feel younger than we are, and we could wish to be even younger than we feel. It's not popular to be old. We are disliking it. And then the next, common associations to old is frailty, illness, forgetfulness, and other negative traits that we don't like. But it's also this is need to be balanced, and when interviewing managers, they also see positive qualities of older workers like wisdom, expertise, calmness, dependability, and so on. The next. The aim of raising the effective retirement age is pursued in many ways in social policy and at workplaces. I shall briefly focus on the measures in the pension system. Raising pensionable age, which was mentioned by Vitalija, and the raising of abandoning the mandatory retirement age. Next. So mandatory retirement age is a kind of legal and compulsory age discrimination in working life. This is age discrimination, and it's legal, and it could be called kind of a calculated ageism. And it's not covered by legislation. Mandatory retirement age is accepted as rational in most countries, with a handful of exceptions. In Norway, mandatory retirement age was in 2015 raised to 72 years, however, with some extensive exceptions. The next, pensionable age from which the pension is payable, is in the National Insurance Scheme in Norway, 62 years of age at the earliest. It has been suggested to raise pensionable age even to 70 by some, and this will hit a huge number of workers in need of or preferring early pension, and the raise in pensionable age is not likely to be implemented in the near future. It's a strong forces against it. So yes, you can take the next. In the Norwegian Senior Policy Barometer, workers 60 years and above were asked when they wanted to stop working, to retire. If you take the next, then 41% would prefer to work to 67 or beyond, 24% would prefer to work to 70 or beyond, and 7% would prefer to work to 75 or beyond. So there's a strong interest, a motivation for people in the 50s and 60s to continue working. And the next slide, please. If workers were allowed to work as long as they want to, and they are able to, then workers who want to quit early would not need to be forced to work longer by a raise in the pensionable age. Accordingly, raise or abandon mandatory retirement age and keep pensionable age low. And I had to say, there are, of course, as you saw in the last presentation, the foreign presentation, there are many other measures needed to stimulate older workers to work, to choose late exit from work. But I like to underline the word stimulate. Not force people to work on, but stimulate people to work on. Yes, I have a, thank you.
So, thank you very much, Per-Erik Solem, for that nice presentation and bringing in another perspective also. We are, as we said, a little bit short on time. There is some comments and questions on the chat. First of all, I think Kerstin Nilsson, you provided us with some information about some nice publications. And we also had a question here from Indre. Let's see. To Vitalija about what could be the possible explanations for the lowered labor market participation during 2008 to 16 in East and Southern Europe. Why did it affect men more? Can it be related to an impact of the economic crisis and its aftermath? Do you want to answer?
Yeah, I can answer to a certain degree, and that's true. 2007-2008 crisis actually first and foremost affected the males. The men employment, we saw the unemployment was rising very fast among men, much slower among women. And that was practically in most of the countries in our region. not only in Southeast Europe or Eastern countries. But as countries picked up, the recovery became more strongly. This impact on men was reversed quite rapidly, actually, and it was the youth unemployment that was left kind of lingering for a long time. However, in Eastern Europe and Southeast Europe was much slower to recover, and 2016 data still does not pick up the latest recovery elements that were by 2017-18. So this might be that they picked up slightly, but I don't expect so. I don't have at the moment the data to say, but the initial impact of the financial crisis was on men employment much stronger.
Thank you.
Do we have any other comments, questions, or remarks? Or you can either write in the chat or just take the word or raise your hand. I must say that this has been very interesting presentations. Let's see. Now we had no. Yeah, here we have something. I try to scroll in the chat. Let's see. This is one important factor, as I indicated in the first slide. The recovery from the 2007 to 8 crisis was quite uneven across the region. You can all read this, I guess.
Yes, Susan, this was my response to Indra, what I was typing while you gave me a floor. So
okay, sorry. Sorry. I wonder, where is the question? Okay, do we have another comment or someone who would like to add something to these very nice presentations? We have another opportunity. When is the next webinar, Gülin? We will have, there is one more planned also for you who still have some interest in the topic and would like to participate next time.
Yes, it's 9th December, and it will be on lifelong learning and education for late working life. So it's also announced in our website, EIWO website. So anyone interested can send an email.
Yeah, we of course welcome you all to that webinar. The time is up. If there is some more discussion or someone who would like to say something, I think we could stay, but we have, as Gülin said, another opportunity also to continue these discussions. No more question. Well, it seems like everybody's very happy with these presentations, and I really think that they capture different aspects also. So it was a very nice webinar, and I would like to really thank all the presenters for taking your time to participate and provide this nice information that you had. So thank you very much, all of you, for participating, and really hope to see you on our next webinar.